The main force, I think, is the shift which has been going on for 300 years of the Industrial Revolution, the changing technologies of the Industrial Revolution. And amazingly, economics never followed this change. They had a static model of technology. They decided in their models that technology is a given, it's always there, instead of realizing that it was the mainspring of the changes and the evolution of the industrial society itself, where we went from the steam engine all the way to taking satellites to the moon. And yet economic theory missed the whole process. I believe that competition, cooperation, and creativity are evolutionary change factors in all human societies. And when you think of competition in the good sense, it's when competition for ideas changes, because we want good new ideas to drive out bad old ideas that are incorrect. So this is where competition is very useful, very important. And also competition to be generous. And I think, for example, in the tsunami relief efforts, where corporations and governments were competing to donate money to the tsunami victims. So there is a good kind of competition. But when competition is written into the rules of the economic model, then it becomes destructive, because it appears that only competition is the way forward. And unfortunately, a lot of governments have picked up this idea too. And they think, oh, we must compete, or governments must compete against each other to make only their economy competitive. And this is very destructive for people, because the economy is only a small part of the society. And the economy is embedded in the society, in the culture, and then in the ecosystem. And so if you try to compete just with the economy, you can destroy social values and you can destroy ecological values. So this is where it becomes destructive. It's a very narrow worldview that comes really from the ideas of René Descartes in France, 3 centuries ago. The idea that you could understand reality by chopping the world into smaller and smaller pieces and studying each piece very carefully. And then there was no way of putting all the pieces back together. And as we say in the TV world, pulling back and taking a wide shot where you integrate everything again. So this is what I believe is happening in many societies now, is people are suddenly realizing, oh, we have to, as we say in the US, connect all the dots, because that is creating the fragmented world that we have today, where different projects are very nice by themselves, defeat other projects. And so you need this coming together, this holistic view. So this is also a very important part of the change that's happening. All of the economic rules emphasize competition while forgetting cooperation. And this is a real failing in the economics profession, is that they are fixated on the idea of competition as the driver of human evolution. And of course it's one part, as Charles Darwin, the great biologist, noticed. But now there is a whole group of scientists who are reassessing Darwin and saying, this has been completely misunderstood by the economists, who thought that Darwin was talking only about competition as being the driving force in human evolution, and forgetting that competition always happens within a context of cooperation. The opportunities that we see today are really disguised as problems. They are all problems. And I think that human beings learn by the challenges that their actions create. And then these challenges are mirrored back. And this is the way we learn. It's very sad that we cannot learn directly without first making mistakes. But I think that this is the way humans learn. They must change things and then, oh, that doesn't work so well, and then try to change something else, you know. And so the kind of challenges that we have created for ourselves, the largest one is that we have interfered with the global ecosystem to the extent now where the oceans are dying and we have a massive change in the climate. And so then we say, aha, you know, and then we have to learn. And if you think of the changes that will come about in societies as we learn to cope with global warming and the death of oceans, they will require cooperation on a level that we haven't achieved before. One of the most important agents of change today comes out of the evolution of communications technologies. And so not only television, but also satellites, the internet, radio, all of the different forms of communication. And they are now potentially available to project all of the ideas of grassroots people all over the world, their creativity in solving their own problems in their local communities. Suddenly this can be projected so that all of us can learn from these experiences all over the world. Media is really creating the possibility of this new force in the world, which I call the world's new superpower, global public opinion. I feel that the idea of is one positive about the future or pessimistic about the future is not really as important a question as the question, do we retain our hope and our faith in the human experiment on this planet? And so this is where the energy for my work comes from, that I have faith that the human species is evolving. If you look at when millions of years ago we came out of Africa, we have evolved quite a lot since then, where we were using clubs and animal skins and so on and so forth. So everything about our history has been this process of evolution. And so why would it suddenly stop? And why would we not expect that humans would go on learning? Now, the lessons we have to learn today are new lessons. They are not so much about technology and how to change the environment and all of this kind of thing, although those are very important, but they are the evolution of our own value systems. This is what's so interesting to me about the work of Charles Darwin, which had been completely overlooked. When you look at Charles Darwin's work, you find that the main thing that Darwin was talking about was the evolution of our moral sentiments and the evolution of altruism, the evolution of our ability to trust and to communicate with each other, to share and to cooperate. And if you look at the historical record, if this had not been true, how would it happen that we came from being small bands of roving nomads picking berries off the trees to building great buildings like in Sao Paulo, and how did we create the European Union and the United Nations, and unless our genius was not for competition but for cooperation. So to me that is an enormous evolutionary force, and it gives me the hope and the faith that this evolution of our moral sentiments will continue. I think the main conditions for sustainability on this planet and peace, they are very intertwined, because obviously war is the most ecologically and socially destructive activity that humans can be involved in. And the great lessons that we're learning today is that there are no solutions through violence. When it comes to the much more difficult task of how do we help build a new nation, how do we create democratic societies, there is no violent way to do that. So I think that we are having many, many lessons all over the world, from the local level where kids in the classroom bully each other, all the way to nation states. We're just seeing now that violence is ineffective. It just creates more problems than it solves. Now, I do believe that people are learning this very slowly, and I believe that mass media can be enormously helpful if they help bring these messages to people, to give them the confidence that actually their intuition about the need to control violence at every level is correct. It is difficult to imagine how we go from the scene that we see today with nation states competing with each other economically and militarily, and ordinary grassroots people having a hard time expressing their views. And yet I think we can see the threads of the evolution of this system. And if you look at what is happening, you see the nation states, which have been for 300 years kind of the dominant government form, where they were going to be completely sovereign. Now this is now a big new discussion at the United Nations, as you know, that when is a country's sovereignty not to be respected? Well, when there is a dictator that hurts their own people, destroys certain groups, like the ethnic cleansing that went on in the old Balkan states, and this kind of thing. So there is a very learned committee now in the United Nations that came out with a report saying, okay, these are the times when a nation cannot be sovereign, and we at the Security Council will intervene. So that is a 300-year shift in perspective, and almost everybody agrees with that now. We see these processes changing. I notice it too in the textbooks, the political science textbooks. If you remember, for generations there have only been two organizations which political scientists look at: the public sector and the private sector. Now we have the civil society, the third sector, and almost all of these ideas now are changing. And I can remember at a time when even the United Nations did not consider civil society. If you were an NGO, they would say, well, I'm sorry, we can't have you in the meeting because we are a government organization. And now I have watched over the past 20 years how this has changed. And if you remember, in Rio de Janeiro here during the Earth Summit, there were all the NGOs there, about 60,000 representatives of civil society, and they made a huge difference. They went and criticized the governments, and they criticized corporations. So they are a new force in the world that holds to account both the corporations and the governments. These are the processes of the change in our ideas about global governance that are going on, and it's difficult if you're an editor of a magazine or you don't notice this slow motion good news. I wrote an editorial one time about slow motion news and there's a lot of slow motion good news out there which is impossible for a busy editor of a magazine to really understand these deep processes. This is another whole dimension of slow motion good news, is you see people at the local level building the eco-villages. And I have been quite involved with many of these organizations from Findhorn in Scotland to the ones in Australia, New Zealand, everywhere in the world. There is this eco-village movement. And the idea is we can't wait for governments to learn about sustainability, and corporations don't understand about sustainability because they are unsustainable in the way they use the environment. So we in our local area will create a new model of how to run a sustainable society. And of course there are ecological aspects and also social aspects emphasizing cooperation and how people can work together in new relationships. So this is a very important part of building a new economy, I mean, what I call a homegrown economy. As a part of that movement, I have written for 30 years about what I call the love economy, which is the other half of everything that goes on in every society. And we measure the competitive sector, which is paid in money, because that's the old model in the economic textbooks. But we completely miss the other half, which is the cooperative, local community building activities. All the great religions that have developed in the world's cultures have at their core, they're very similar ideas. And as I looked at them, and I wonder why is it they are always fighting with each other when the ideas at the core are so similar. And they are the golden rule, that do as you would be done by. This is in every major religious tradition. And the other is that each one of us has a spark of the divine within us, which can be activated so that we can work toward the highest purpose of the whole and to understand our relationship with each other as part of the human family. So this is the core of those old religions which can lead us into the future. I think one of the best expressions of the new spirituality is first, you know, we have talked about the eco-villages. This is a wonderful new expression of this spirituality. And another is the Earth Charter. And the Earth Charter, which began in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, traveled around the world with all of these different religious groups and civil society and NGOs, and came up with these 16 principles of human responsibilities. And this is the key to the maturation of the human family, is where we go beyond the individual, you know, my rights. Of course, human rights are very important, but the larger view is what are my responsibilities? Because no rights can come unless they come with responsibilities. And so the Earth Charter is a grassroots expression of what are human responsibilities to our families, to our communities, to the countries in which we live, to the ecosystem and the planet itself. I am a fervent supporter of the Earth Charter, and I was very honored to be there when it was launched at the Peace Palace in The Hague in 2000. And there were all of these international lawyers, and they were saying that this is the most important piece of international law which has developed, they call it soft law. So I think it's a great achievement of the civil society in the world that this new Universal Declaration of Human Responsibilities came not from governments or from corporations, but it came from the grassroots all around the world in the form of the Earth Charter, which has 16 principles of human responsibilities at every level of societies. And so this is a huge evolution of consciousness. The idea of planetary citizenship, of course, is very new and very ambitious. But in a sense, we all have an intuition that times have changed now. And in the old days, we could be a citizen of our village, a citizen of our country. But the idea of any more than this was simply not possible. And then in the early 1960s, for the first time, we saw photographs of the beautiful blue planet that we all live on. It's in the blackness of space. And that was the birth of a new idea, that we have another identity as well. And this is like an overcoat that we put on. And this is that we are all members of the same human family. Whatever our culture, whatever the way we look, we are all members of the human family, and we live or die together on this fragile little planet. There are levels at which people can contribute to planetary citizenship, like the eco-village level. If you are living an exemplary life in your own community and working cooperatively with your neighbors and protecting the environment, you are a planetary citizen. And you know, we don't need to think of it as people running around and intervening and going to UN meetings or anything like that. If you are an artist creating beautiful images that help people understand the oneness of humanity, you are a planetary citizen. All of these beautiful children coming in and being born at this time. I think that these children now completely understand that we live on one planet, the human race is all one family, and those are the premises from which they operate. And right now, many of them feel completely alienated from this existing individualistic, competitive, companies creating all kinds of junk, you know, and all this kind of thing. So the children, many of the young people today, appear to be rebels, and actually they have higher consciousness. And there's a lot of studies showing that they don't want to compromise like their parents did, going and working for a big company to produce junk, you know. They are looking for meaning and purpose for their lives. And so I would say to these wonderful young people, hold on to those visions of the whole, and keep the human family in mind and the beautiful blue planet, and let that be your passion.